Hey everybody, welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. We are talking to Marjorie Savage about this book. You're on your own, but I'm here to help you. Mentoring your child during the college year. So, welcome, Marjorie.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, so just for folks who want to know about your background, you actually worked at the University of Minnesota working with incoming parents as their parent program director, working with 28,000 students and their parents. I can only imagine what that would have been like. How many phone calls did you get a day? Was it phone call? How much parent contact did you get for incoming freshmen?
Interestingly, at a big university like that, I didn't end up getting a lot of phone calls every day. I have colleagues that work at small private schools, and they got a lot more than I did.
That's
So there's a little
interesting.
bit of difference. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so um, I showed you this before, which is this document. His now it started off with 3 pages. It's now 4 pages.
Okay. You
Here's
are
what
a
I did.
student.
I am. I think I'm a good student too. I was reading your book, and there were a whole bunch of what to expect. In terms of emotionally, because this is a hard time both for the parent, the child, the kids in the family. It's a big emotional. It's a big transition for everyone, and a lot of ensuing emotions occur. And I've read a lot of books about that. What I didn't think about were all the practical matters that you had in here. And what they did for me is inspire a bunch of dialogue, or I guess I would say outlining our expectations for our son before he goes. Because I think oftentimes you just send kids off to college without assuming that they know what you're expecting from them, and they don't. Right? And why would they? Like, we don't, and then we wait until something happens, until they have several overdrafts in their credit card, or they forget to send that receipt that we needed for our taxes, or those kinds of things. We only know through error that we should have had a conversation with them beforehand. And so what this book helped me do is pre-anticipate stuff. Not that hopefully it will make a difference if we outline the things that we prefer. So that's at least what I was thinking. Is that why you wrote this book, or what was your intention when you wrote this book?
Actually, part of it was that expectations of parents for their students had changed. In the 1980s, 1990s, the message to parents was consistently, you just need to let go. They're adults now. Everything's going to be fine. We are here. And as I watched the progression of families, realized that parents weren't taking that message as well anymore. It was more of a realization that my kid was 17 years old yesterday. They're 18 years old today. They didn't overnight become responsible, intelligent, bright, manageable people, able to take care of themselves. It's a process.
Mm-hmm.
And it also was becoming more and more an expensive process.
Mm-hmm.
And to just let your child go, and with the understanding that you might have $20,000, $30,000 or more invested in that child for this year, parents wanted some say in that.
Right.
So it became more of a matter of, let me work with you. Don't just tell me to go away, because I'm
Yeah.
not going to.
It's interesting. In the very beginning of the book, you talk about some of the changes that you've seen in, and almost a defense of helicoptering parenting, which I appreciate because I think I would classify myself. I don't know if I'm exactly a helicopter parenting, but I'm somewhere in that territory. But what's interesting is that you said today's college students identify their parents as their most trusted advisors and turn to a family member when they face problems or when they simply want to talk to. About half of the so-called millennial generation are in touch with their parents daily, and about 40% contact their parents one or more times a week. I was actually pretty surprised about that because I think I called my parents once a week, but that wasn't typical, I don't think.
And now it's actually higher levels of communication. That book was written a couple of years ago, and
Hmm.
what we're finding now is that the majority of students are in touch with their parents on a daily basis, not necessarily as a phone call, but a text, an email, something like
What
that.
are they? What are these people texting their children? What are they doing?
It's a check-in. It really is often just a matter of good morning, how's your day look, something like that. And it's not necessarily always the parents who are initiating that conversation.
Oh,
The students are doing absolutely as much. I got a great
interesting.
grade on the test that I took yesterday.
Yeah,
Um, you should see what they gave us for lunch today.
yeah.
Just little check-ins like that.
Interesting. Okay, well, I can only hope, but I don't even know what I think. I mean, I think the thing that you bring up is that families today have a much closer relationship, and so that's part of it. It's the connection and relationship that we have is very different than like my parents who would say, okay, like during a summer, um, and I lived in a small neighborhood in a cul-de-sac. I would leave in the morning and come back for dinner. Like that's it's like a wild animal running around all day. And my parents pretty much let me. I mean, no one had an issue with it. I'd be doing like healthy kid stuff, playing outside and building forts and all that stuff. And so in this generation, it's different though because I feel like with my son, we talk every day. I know about his life. I know what he's thinking. My parents never. My dad talked to me a lot, and it was also uncommon. Every night he'd come over and we'd talk, and he'd put me down to sleep. Not that I needed that as a high school kid, but he still would come over and he would talk to me every night,
Uh-huh.
which was precious. And I think more and more parents this generation have that. Is that what you're finding too?
Well, there is certainly that, and I think smaller families are part of it. But there's also the recognition that a college experience is going to be really essential,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of preparation that parents are seeing as essential to getting their student into the best college that they can.
Hmm.
So taking them to the various kinds of lessons, making sure that you know what their assignments are. Part of it is even that parents are now expected in K through 12 to be in touch with their kids'
Oh
school,
yeah.
with the
Oh,
teachers in ways that they were not, in your
right.
generation, certainly not
Mm,
in my generation. So
yeah.
there's a long time habit of maintaining contact with what is going on in school. What are you learning? What is your homework? Let me
Right.
see your homework. It's
Right.
not just an expectation. Schools sort of require that of parents at this
Right.
point.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation because I think that schools didn't require that because the class sizes were small. It's a very complicated web of how parents today ended up the way that we have ended up, right? Because schools are much bigger, so parents have to chip in more. I mean that not only do we have to engage and ask the kid about the school, but we have to go and volunteer, because the teacher
Yeah.
is understaffed. So there are a whole bunch of reasons in which we've gotten involved. And I do think, though, as you state in your book, and I think that a lot of other parenting books talk about, is that we still have to let go. That doesn't mean that we still continue managing their lives like the best concierge on earth. This is not our jobs.
Right.
Um, have you seen? Where have you seen parents just cross the line, or what would you say the line is? As an administrator, where you're like, okay, that's just everyone in the staff is like, please put this parent down, please make her stop or make him stop.
And where they do cross the line is when they are making the decisions instead of their student. The
Oh,
student needs to, find the best information they can when they make a decision, and that can certainly include talking to your parents about, I have to make this choice, I have to do this. But when the parent is saying, no, you must do it this way, then I think you're
oh
not
yeah,
giving your student a chance to develop the brain capacity that they need to develop and develop the stages of growth that they need to go through.
right. So that's kind of authoritative parenting, just continuing as if you're like their CEO of their whole life.
Right.
Okay, got it.
And one thing I would say is you mentioned helicopter parents. That's
Hmm.
a phrase that I really hate.
Okay.
Um, I think that it parents do have a role in guiding their student especially as they start school. As a freshman, you're going to parent differently than you did before they started college. But you'll also, as a senior, be looking back and saying, "Yeah, I wouldn't do that anymore. My son or daughter can handle those things now."
Yeah.
So it's a process for everybody.
You know,
And where
my,
I think
oh,
it becomes a challenge is if parents are so afraid of that helicopter label that they don't stay involved. And that's
mm,
I have seen as a real problem. The student is no longer talking about school, or they seem incredibly depressed, and the parent is saying, "I don't want to be a helicopter parent," so they don't
oh,
step in. That
mm,
is a tremendous danger.
okay. So, um, in the, my rule of thumb, because it was very hard during the whole college process, it was very hard to know what was the line that I would draw and when it was over. And I would say that I stepped over a couple times and then, I'd step back. And it was hard, though, to do that dance because it's a very important decision which college you get into and what college you go to and et cetera, and applying generally. And my rule of thumb ended up being that if it's the first time someone's ever done something and it's just a matter of understanding the content, then it's
Mhm.
really important to explain to them because unless you explain to them what the outcomes and consequences are going to be and how someone goes about a process, they don't know. So there's some guidance that's needed. And so a lot of the things that are in this document from your book or in the interest of that. So I'm going to touch upon a couple of these things because I thought they were like just things I'm like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. But record keeping is one of them. I hadn't thought about. Oh yeah, like what happens if like do you have your passport? What's your immunization card? What about your do you even have your medical insurance card? It wasn't until reading this book that I thought, I know we switched insurance companies, but wait, what happened to your card? Where is it? I had to call and ask for it and then things like practical things like your contact lens prescription or various medical prescriptions. I mean, your kid I sadly have been handling all that stuff. I think probably most parents do, right? And so how does my kid know what this prescription is? They don't like they haven't gone they know that somehow mom goes to the pharmacy and mysteriously these things appear. But what is that whole process associated with that? What happens with insurance? What happens if your computer is stolen? What happens if your computer is broken? Did you save that warranty like mom asked you to, or did you put it under that gigantic pile next to your desk that I think it's underneath? And why you have to care, right? Like these
Right.
are all practical things. And then, did you have parent forums at the University of Minnesota where parents could ask questions on a Facebook page?
We have a Facebook page. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Well, I'm on the one for my son's college, and people were bringing up things that I hadn't even thought about, like power of attorney. I was like, oh my god, just stuff that you don't even think about. Like they should have told you when your kid hits 18, like, hey, you may want to think about power of attorney because your kid can, if they get into a medical problem or they become incapacitated, you don't necessarily automatically have the right to make decisions on their behalf. And you're like, oh my gosh, social security numbers, license numbers, credit card statements, what to do with them? Like, so how did you come up with these lists? Is it from your own personal experience or what happened?
Well, part of it was I had two kids who went through college, and I learned a lot along the way. But the other part of it was simply tracking throughout the year what are parents calling about? What are the concerns that they have? That is the result of a lot of other parents' issues as a year progressed. Yeah.
So they would call you up and say what? So like they'd say, "Where's? Can you send my son his? How do I get my son's social security? Like would they do?"
Every question would come up in different ways. Yeah. How can I find out my student's grades? Why didn't you send me his report card? Not
Right.
knowing that that's not done anymore. So,
Okay, and that was a surprise to me as well. So, when your child, tell us a little bit what happens when your child becomes 18 and what happens with report cards. In fact, all of their personal information.
right. And the university does have records. FERPA all, it's private and the student owns that documentation unless they choose to give it to somebody. And in most schools, it is a matter of going online and saying, my parents can get this information. They can get the financial information so that they can pay the bills. But if they don't give you that permission, then you may not know what the bill is stated as. It goes to your student, not to you. Grades, the
Oh,
same thing. So, yeah, you want to have that discussion about what information do you need to have? Are they going to give you permission to access it? How are you going to get that information? And also,
mm,
what are the consequences if you don't get that information? So if they don't tell you what the bill is, you can't pay it and they're not going to remain in school. If they
right.
don't give you the grades, you have the right to say, then I won't pay for your school. I need to know how you're doing in your classes.
Right.
So,
So it's having the discussion beforehand to cover all those things because otherwise they're getting the invoice. They think you have the invoice, but you don't. And so you're not paying and they're getting notices like, please pay. And they're like, Mom.
yep, you've predicted that one.
Okay. And then they go, Marjorie. All right. So the other thing that I picked up is just simple things like, what do you do when your child is sick? So were people calling you asking, you're like, what is my kid's sick? What do I do?
Oh, yeah, it's a really hard thing for a parent to get that call. Mom, I'm sick, and you're, 500 miles or farther away.
Right.
I have had parents on occasion say, can you go check on my child?
Oh,
Well,
wow.
there's nothing I can do for your kid. There are people, if they're living in a residence hall, who can check on them, but you probably don't want the parent program director to show up at your kid's door. That's
Yeah.
that's not a comfortable thing for the
You're not
student.
going to bring that child chicken soup and some cough drops and like a warm, snuggly blanket? Marjorie, you're failing.
Actually, there is a service on our campus that will do that. Parents can call and have them take chicken soup to their. Not all schools are going to have that service.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I was kind of surprised the number of marketing programs. Like, don't you want to send your kids brownies every week? I'm like, why? So they can gain more than 15 pounds? Why are you asking me these things? Okay,
Okay.
chicken soup. Oh my gosh. Okay, I think that's fantastic and just disturbing at the same time.
But then that is a reason to talk to your student about what they can do when they feel sick.
Exactly.
You want to go through that with them because they kind of know, but they don't really.
Exactly. Well, you don't know. Well, here's the thing: you don't know until you're really sick and you think you need to go. And by that time, for
You know,
teenagers in particular, they're almost dead. Like like they can't even move, and they're like, maybe I should go to the doctor. It's like, yeah, you should have gone like 4 days ago. But okay, now here's what you got to do. And the last thing they want to do is like do queries and look up their medical insurance card. Like they don't even know
figure out.
what to do. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I called the school. I'm like, what does a child do when they're sick? They wrote out a whole process, which then inspired all these other emails from the parents. What about dental? What about like all this stuff? But it's important. Like they have to know to bring $10 to do a copay, or they have to bring money with them, which they probably wouldn't know. They'd be like, "Oh, I'm sick. I dragged my butt all the way over here, and now you're asking me to go back to my dorm room and like give you $25." Like, nah. So, so I just wrote it down. Will he remember this in the document? Who knows? But at least I told him once, and my job is done. I feel like
Well, at least you will remember when it comes up again. You
yes,
have to do the research to tell
yes.
them. So,
That's part of the reason I did before too. It's like if he calls me, because what happens is you're in the middle of your day and someone's like, I'm really sick, and you're like, I'm in a meeting. I can't jump on this right away. So now I can just cut paste like. Please read email. Okay, so the other thing is financial, which is so interesting because we just got our son a credit card because you want to establish a line of credit, and so we thought that's a good thing. We sent him a credit card, and then and we talked to him about this is a 24% interest rate, so you're going to want to pay right away. Don't keep, this is not, if you're going to get a loan, this is the most expensive way to get a loan. So don't go this route. But we talked about auto pay and things like that, so this yesterday he said, "Can I go out with see my friends?" I'm like, "Nope, not until you set up the Mint account where you take all your invoices and put it in Mint and set that credit card and set it up and your Wells Fargo account and you set up the auto pay. Then you can go see your friends." But they need to know how to do it, right?
Yeah. And a discussion to have is when is it okay for them to use that and when do you not want them to use it?
Right.
Um, a lot of parents will say if it's an emergency, go ahead, use it. But a student's idea of what is an emergency might not be the same as your
Pizza
idea.
run. Pizza run is an emergency.
Yeah.
I need to go to that concert.
And if you're going to end up paying the bill rather than them, they need to be able to tell you this is what I've spent this on and this is why.
Yeah. I think it's so we talked about stuff like, and then I include, I did a little section that says, what do you do if you've lost your credit card or
Yeah,
misplaced it for a little period of time and you're not even sure you know where it is because you don't know it until it happens. And if you don't have a credit card, you don't know what to do. So
right.
just like simple things that I think, "Oh, okay." And then I said, "Oh, and you know what the overdraft fee is? Just you should know. And because you're going to pay for them out of your own personal wallet when you overdraft. So you're going to want to know." And then things that you said in here that I just love, like practical things like keep the receipts because for an expensive item that doesn't work, you may need to return it. Like stuff that it sounds stupid, but they may not know. Making my son sound like a moron, but
Oh no, he's 18. So,
he knows some of the stuff. Um, and then, uh, and then, the other thing that I thought I'd ask you because you have in the back of the book you have some ideas on budgets, and we had actually before even reading your book, surprisingly, did come up with a budget,
good.
and I wanted to ask your thoughts on how much seems to be too much to give a kid. Do you have any thoughts about that? Like, it probably depends on the kid, but we were thinking gradually we're going to have him become more and more responsible for things at school and about his school experience. But do you have any thoughts or personal experience on that?
You mean in terms of how much to give them for personal spending or how to budget over the years?
How much you give them for personal spending? I think we actually came up with a relatively good budget. We looked at a whole bunch of different things on the internet, but how much they pay and how much you pay. I mean, if you can afford, which we can afford to pay everything, should
Right.
we, or is that a positive thing? Like,
Oh, to me, it's extremely important for the student to have some money in the game themselves.
yeah,
They tend to take their education more seriously. And I've had a lot of students talk about their friends. Their parents pay for everything, and he just doesn't have any clue about money.
hmm,
And in order to learn about money, this is a really good opportunity. A lot of parents will lay out over the years, the first year you have to pay your spending money, or
hmm,
at least half of your spending money, something, set
right,
up some limit. The next year you have to pay for your spending money and your books. And the year after that, you have to contribute to, you're going to be living off campus at that point. You figure out how to pay for food,
hmm,
and raise the bar a little bit every year. And make it clear what you will help with and what you will take care of because there's a difference between the two.
hmm.
You might help with funding your students' education, but I had students say when they graduated, my parents always said they were going to help pay for college. Well, now I have to pay back all these loans. I thought they were paying for it, not that they were helping by paying some of it. So
Ah,
here,
wow,
what the outcome is going to be at the end of the day, and you may have things that your student is going to have to pay for
right,
as loans,
right,
um, and they may not understand that.
right.
So the more that you can guide them, especially financially, I think is really important. What affects the student financially can affect the parents financially.
Right, absolutely. Right.
So you do have some buy-in on that, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well,
Also
I
have parents say that they didn't want to have their kids worry about money.
Hmm.
They need to worry about money. They need to
Right.
learn
It's a
about
life
money.
skill, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, even with the loan, like there probably may be some times where they want to take a loan, like they've made a colossal error in their overdrafts and they have $1,000. Like I don't know, that would have to be a colossal error, like you're asleep for months. But let's say that they did that, then I don't even know if it's even permissible. The bank would probably cut them off. But let's say that there was. I said, you know, there are times when you need a loan. Like the first time you mess up, we'll give you a 0% interest loan, and then after that, we're going to charge you 5% because you'll have known better. And every time you do that, you will give you the money, but it's at a loan, so that you have some skin in the game when you, because that's what's going to happen when you leave school, right? The reality is that's what's going to happen. So why not mirror? We were also thinking, like, you know, basically having them pay bill, like their phone service would be a bill that they would pay next year, and get used to paying and checking. Like they're going to be a lot more careful about all those texts and phone calls and things like that. Okay, so the other thing that seems like, yeah, duh, why haven't I had this conversation already, is coursework. It's like I just said, what courses did you sign up for this semester? And he explained everything, and it was very rational. And in fact, he took the guidance in your book, not having read your book. He said, I thought I actually would get a mix of big classes and small classes. And I would do, I know he took a poli sci, he took a sociology, he took a visual media. Like he's just taking the gamut of things because he said, I just want to know what kind of things I'm passionate about. So I'm taking like a broad range of these different things. How did you come up with the ideas of like that algorithm, and based on your experience, or just like that's a practical thing, or how did you come up with that idea?
Well, I can't claim that responsibility. I took it from academic advisors at colleges and universities.
Okay.
And all students should have an academic advisor that they will talk to, especially the first year when they're registering. And those are things that it's pretty common to be talked to about. So your
Okay.
students should probably be hearing that message, and getting that kind of guidance. Parents don't always get the message and can be a little confused at times because, well, you're going to major in, I don't know, engineering. Why aren't you taking all engineering courses? Well, there are
Mm,
really good reasons why a student wouldn't take all engineering courses,
mm-hmm.
and that's why that information is in the book. So
Mm.
should
What's a good reason? Because I imagine that is a very common, like, why aren't you taking all engineering? So what's the reason for folks that haven't read the book?
The reason is that, first of all, if you took only engineering courses your first year, you would burn out completely because those are really intense classes. And what they will be told is you need to take something that is, writing intensive, and something that is, maybe has some lab classes. You meet people in different ways when you take a lab with them.
Mm, that's
Language class, as an example, is a way you have to sit and talk to somebody in pretty basic terms in a foreign language about what is your
mm,
family like, and they get to know
mm-hmm.
each other. And they're also in a series of classes then that, you'll probably be in a class with many of the same people next semester and next year. So it's a way to establish yourself within the institution, get to know people in that
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable first couple of months at the institution, and continue friendships over time. So there are reasons to take small classes, big classes, hard classes, easier classes.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Also, I think so as when we talk to them, like we basically setting expectations. Like we want you to explore topics, even and take the challenging class, even if it means that you don't get an A. We'd rather you take the challenging class and not get an A, and find the things that you love. If you take that challenging class and you get a whatever C, maybe you still love it and you want to continue, and it was a really hard teacher, but that stretch helped you love it more. You just don't know, so don't take yourself out of the game. And then there's this practical part about getting a job. So what is the common wisdom at your school about, okay, so you're going to take art history and romance languages and all these things, but then how do you actually balance that with getting a job? How does one work with people in the university to make that happen?
Um, Different schools are going to handle jobs in different ways, and I will say that at probably most schools there are jobs that are only like 8, 10, 12 hours per week.
Hmm.
And for a first year student, that's a good plenty. There's a lot that they're learning and adjusting to. You don't want a really complex job as a first year student that it takes so long to learn
Right.
that you're stressed.
Right.
Um, so taking fewer hours of work, but also using that as sort of balancing your time. It's a
Hmm.
way for students to know I have to be at this job at this time of day. I better do my studying before that, or I better set up a schedule so I'm doing it right after. And it does help students just manage their time in a much more effective way.
Right.
It's a good thing. And then having their own spending money is a really good feeling.
And how about going to the career office to, like, where will all these classes lead me? Is that something that the career office does? I mean, like, are they involved with your, or is it just your academic advisor that you talk to?
Um, Different schools again are going to do it a little differently. At a larger school, you're going to have a different advisor for academics and for careers. There's usually a career services office.
Hmm.
And we would recommend that a first year student at least visit a career office once at some point during the year just to lay the groundwork and say, maybe it's even, I have no idea what I want to do. I just wanted to stop in and say I'm here. These are the classes I'm taking. This is the one I'm most passionate about right now. And get used to the concept. Second
Hmm.
year, again, once or twice stop in, because at
Hmm.
that point they're probably starting to think about what major am I going
Hmm.
to have,
Hmm.
breaking down the major into there's always going to be different kinds of jobs within a single major.
Hmm.
So I love working with children, but what does that actually mean? Do I want to do
Hmm.
research that affects children? Do I want to directly work with children?
Hmm.
But looking at things from different ways, and they will get different perspectives by visiting that career
Yeah,
office.
it's funny that when I talked to the career office where my son is going to college, they had said, you know what, first of all, come because we actually have a ton of workshops on writing resumes, interviewing, and these are like free resources. I charge money for that because I'm a career coach. Like, do it for free. There are people who know how to work with your population, college students, and they are professionals. So get all the resources that you can when you're in there. And then the second thing he said is, it's really hard if you coast into the career office senior year and like, I need a job because I don't know who you are. I don't know anything about you. You're asking me to understand your narrative in like 5 minutes and write a resume. It's like, it's really hard for them. So I think your idea of building a relationship over time is actually a really important one. Okay. And then there's something in here. It's funny. I was just talking to someone about making friends, and she had said that she had worked for the president of the university of which my son's going to, and she said that because she had worked for him, and her daughter went to that was going as an incoming freshman. He said, "I just have one piece of advice: that be discerning about the friends that you hang out with. Don't just people in your hallway or end up being the friends. Be discerning, go out and put yourself out there." And that I've heard several times this belief that how you start off is how you're going to continue. And I have no idea. It's not like folklore. I don't know where this information comes from. Do you know where this information comes from? I'd like to say that to my son, but frankly I don't know if it's true, and I don't know the basis of this information.
Well, one of the things that a first year student is going to worry the most about as they start college is anybody going to like me?
Hmm.
It's just an inherent fear, and the tendency is to meet the people who live closest to you. Um, Typically and hopefully by the end of that first year they will have met people by being involved in a club or an organization, something like that, that has certainly something in common with them. If
Hmm.
they join, for instance, some career-based club, the photography club or something, they will meet people who have that shared interest. A lot of times what happens is after the freshman year, students go home for the summer and they have sort of a reflection time and think about, I had a really good time this year, but I'm not sure that those friends that I hung out with were really the best. Am I
Mm,
going to make different friends this year?
mm, okay, well, that's interesting because I have some time to reflect. Like,
Right.
who did I become? Like
Right.
a student that I've been staying in contact that is going to the school said, yeah, my I had friends who they became the party girl, so they went out and drank and they fooled around with lots of guys, and I think they came and they went back to the summer going like, I don't know if I want to sustain this whatever persona that I created, and that I don't think it's healthy. I don't want to do it, and they came back a really different person, but they almost had to have that summer to start off.
Right.
So that's why I've heard. So this makes sense, though, because I've heard some sophomores say. I talked to someone who's a junior, and she said, I'm mentoring someone, and she said, freshman year, sometimes people really have a hard time freshman year socially in the first semester. Then some people have it second semester, and a lot of people have it sophomore year when they get back. And I think that now I understand why, because they kind of look and go, wait a second, have I been discerning throughout
Right.
this whole time and picking my friends based on who, like things that they learned when they're 5 years old. Like, are they nice people? Do they support you?
Do they share?
Do they share? It's kind of it sounds ridiculous, but it's almost they probably have amnesia because it's just such. I assume like there's so many people and they're just trying. Is that what's happening? I don't know. What's your sense of what's happening?
Well, it is that, and one of the issues that comes up a lot is that at many schools, early in the year, like October, they're starting to make plans for where they're going to live the next year. So parents will start getting in October.
In October?
Yeah, not at all schools, but at many schools, it will be if you don't get an apartment off campus and sign up in October, you won't get one. That's the message that's going.
Wow. Okay.
So they are making plans with people that they've known for a month
Oh
to live
no.
with them next year. And right now, they may be the best friends in the world, but you don't really know a whole lot about a person over the course of a month. Um, then 6 months later, they may feel utterly trapped that these are the people I have to live with next year. They're not the people that I want to hang out with. What?
Mm.
So, it is important to talk to your student about those issues and find out, is it really essential that they make that decision this early, or can they wait so they know
Mhm.
it's going to be better? But
Mhm.
also encourage them to meet people outside of their initial clique. When they go into a classroom, do introduce yourself to the person sitting next to you. We're all creatures of habit. The next time they go in, they're going to sit in the same seat. The other person is too. And then they have somebody with whom they can talk about classes with, they can share notes with, they can be in study groups with, and meet people in different ways rather than
Mhm.
just the social atmosphere of a residence hall.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think also I didn't know that, and secondly, there's frats, right? So a lot of frats rush right when you get in freshman year, so you don't even really know what you're getting into, or a little bit like the school that my son go is going to start rush second semester of freshman year, but still you don't know a lot, and then you may be living with this group of guys. In my case of my sons, for 3 years. So that would be really hard. I mean, do you have any advice? I don't know if University of Minnesota has frats and what you've seen over the course of the years.
Um, the advice is for the student to really get to know the people in the fraternity or sorority, not just go with the hype of, oh, I've got to join, I've got to be a frat guy or whatever,
Right.
but really look at the values of the organization, and do you really match with that?
Mm,
And also focus on not the party end of things, or the social end of things, but there's a lot of philanthropy that goes on. Do you buy into that? There's a lot of academic expectations. Are you going to buy into that? Um, so look at
mm.
the full perspective, and parents can ask those questions. That's legitimate.
Yeah, it's interesting because we would run into someone who had gone to this college and they'd said, there's the really rich boys, and that as part of their pledge, they have to smash Rolex watches. Okay. It's like, why do people, oh my God. And it was the rich boys, and then there are these Euro dudes who are like these, like most of them are from international, and they're all like, funky and European, and like, whatever that means. And then the third one was, I think, I can't remember what the third one was. And then
There
one
should
of
be
them was,
jocks in there someplace.
that what?
Jocks in there
Yeah,
some.
I'm sure one of them was like jocks. And then there is, but these are, now they actually rank. There's actually a place where they rank fraternities and sororities based on how good they are. What the heck? Like, that's awful. Like, you kind of know in those schools which are the top three or four
Right.
sororities, but to have them ranked is another thing altogether. And then one of them, he said, awful. Like, they took a gerbil and they raised the gerbil, and then they put it in a blender and made their pledge just eat the gerbil. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, whatever you do, don't go to that one because those people are savages.
And if the student sees something that is truly grotesque like that, get away. Just get away.
I mean, that's just abhorrent. When I heard that, I was just like, I can't even believe that this happens. But, and I'm like, I think that's folklore. Like, that cannot happen. But who knows? I'm not sure what frat people do. Okay, so communication plan. Actually, I had talked to a couple of other authors about, empty nesting and, having your kid go. And they said the one thing I didn't do is set up a communication plan. And you need to. How often are you going to communicate? When do we communicate? What's the method that we communicate? And then this woman said, you know what? Like right now they have these alert systems. So it's like,
Oh yeah.
shooter on the campus.
Yeah.
And if your kid, and I said, if you get an alert that says shooter on the campus, like text me right away to say I'm alive, just so that I know, or like hurricane on the campus, like I want to know that you're okay. So please, like the rule of thumb is when you hear those things, text mom immediately, because otherwise I'll just fret about in the house, worried about you. Any other thoughts about text? You mentioned something in the book, like, and I wondered, how did she get involved in this? Where people have been texting and people like where they haven't responded, and so is this go retrieve my son or daughter from their room? They're probably dead. Is that how you got involved?
I've had a few of those phone calls. Yeah. If you don't hear from your student for a time, you will worry.
Yeah.
If you and there are times when students really, well, for one thing, they may not have their phone. They may have lost it. They may not want to tell you.
Right.
Um, there are also times when a student really wants a barrier, just does not want to talk to their family. Um,
Mm.
that doesn't happen a lot, but it does occasionally happen. If you're truly concerned, if you have tried multiple ways to contact your student and said you need to contact me because I'm worried, you can call the institution and have a wellness check done on them. Um, it's intrusive for the student. It could be the matter of a police officer knocking on their door
Oh
or coming
wow.
to us and asking if they're there. So it really is an intrusive thing, and you don't want to do it lightly.
Right.
Um, but if you're genuinely worried that you haven't heard from them, and 24 hours is not an appropriate time to decide,
Right.
no, I need to have this done. But if you haven't heard from them for a week, 2 weeks, whatever seems appropriate to your family, you can have that done, yeah.
Okay. Wow. So a police officer knocks on your kid's door to make sure that they're okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then parents often will say, but don't tell them that I asked for it. Well,
Yeah.
kids aren't stupid. They're going
Okay.
to know if a police officer shows up that mom and dad did this. So,
Can't
yeah.
you just call I mean, this is prompting yet another action item for me, which is can I get the phone number of the RA? So if there is an emergency and my child has gone dark for a period of time because they're studying or whatever, the RA can just knock on their door. It seems like that would be the most practical person, or is that?
I would actually suggest that instead of the RA, who is somebody who lives on the floor with them, that you contact the hall director. The
Yeah.
RA needs to have kind of a less formal relationship with the student because they are they're living together, there's more of a friendship sort of atmosphere.
Right.
The hall director, who probably lives in the building as well, could monitor that and could decide whether they need to do the checking or the. It's
Oh.
not good for parents to be contacting a residence hall assistant about questions related to their student. If you have questions, either ask the student, or if it's something more significant, then the hall director is the professional who can.
I didn't realize there was such a hall. What's a hall director?
The hall director would oversee all of the RAs, as an example. And it
Oh.
typically somebody with a master's degree in student development who is living in the hall or in the compound at any rate. There would be somebody who would oversee all of the
Okay. So
residents.
then the hall director could call the resident advice. It's like, okay, this parent said that child hasn't been like showing up or contacting or whatever for a week. Could you? Because there's no attendance. Like you don't even know if they're going to school, right?
That's true.
Classes. So, I mean, I can see as a parent being upset about that. Hopefully, that doesn't happen. All right, roommate issues. What are the typical roommate issues that you've seen, and what's the best way of handling those? Is that something that they involve the administration? Is it required to just talk to the kids? What happens?
In the best scenario, well, in the best scenario, they'll be good friends. That's
What?
what everybody hopes for.
Right.
That doesn't happen as much as what you would probably expect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, these are students who have probably never had anybody living in the same room with them before. They probably had
Right.
their own bedroom, their own bathroom in many cases, and sharing is a whole new experience for them.
Mm-hmm.
Different habits can really get on each other's nerves. Different kinds of music
Mm,
preferences can really bother them. And typically, in the best scenario, what will happen is the RA, resident assistant, will come in and do a roommate agreement that spells out, here are some things that I'm not happy with. Can you give a little bit on this? I'll give a little bit on this thing that's fun.
mm, okay.
Uh, and it's a matter of, you don't have to be best friends. You don't even have to really like each other, but you do have to respect each other.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are issues with the respect side of things, then by all means the RA or the hall director can work with them on that.
Okay, that's good to know. Gosh, I feel like I'm preventing all sorts of phone calls to the school. Not that hopefully I'm not going to be involved in any of this. I pray not to be involved in any of this. Okay, so what's the story with consent nowadays on campus? Like what? So in the old days, like people would make a move. Most often, it was the guy that would make a move. Now there's this whole idea of consent. So I know if a girl says no, it means no. But does a guy be like, here, can you sign on this line? Oh, and this line, initial here. Like, what's required? Or the girl, let's say, that they wanted to actually involved in some type of relationships. And is it just sex, or is it any type of physical advance? I just don't understand what's happening on college campuses.
Um, where touching is involved, you do need some consent.
Okay.
Otherwise, you can be accused of assault, sexual
Okay.
assault.
Okay.
Um, my advice is that students simply keep in mind the words respect and responsibility.
Hmm.
Uh, if you're being respectful, you're not going to get in trouble. If you're being responsible, you're probably not going to get in trouble. So keeping those couple of ideas in mind pretty much takes care of all the problems that are likely to come up.
Okay, so this is my as a mother of a son. I'm just thinking, okay, there's the vast majority of women who are going to be perfectly fine with the arrangement that you just mentioned, and then there are friends. I've had them, psycho friends, who like I'm not sure what story conjured up in their head, but something happened. They don't want to take accountability for their actions. All sorts of things happen. In
Mhm.
those cases, because there's a he said, she said scenario, how do you clarify those things as an administration? Not your administration, but I mean, how does one clarify that?
Well, and that's always going to be a challenge. Well, it's not always going to be a challenge because genuinely, if you are a respectful person, other people are going to know that and they're going to be able to vouch for you.
Ah, okay.
Uh, if you have been responsible if the guy has been responsible, then the worst case scenarios are probably not going to come out anyway. So again, it's going
What
back
does
to,
it mean to be responsible? I guess I know, like, okay, what does it mean in this context?
well, for one thing, it's making sure there is no pregnancy, no diseases that are conveyed from one to another. There's
Right.
that. But there's also doing what you said you were going to do, and asking for consent, or making sure that you feel very confident that you got consent.
So is it so if I'm a guy and or I'm a woman and I'm interested, it's like, well, um, I gave you my consent. Like, what is happening? Or like, so because all of these things are kind of like natural, right? They used to happen kind of natural, and like the body responds, and that was consent. But now you need to have
Well,
verbal consent.
it's simple enough to say, "Are you okay with this? Are you still okay with this?"
Okay, got it. Okay, so
Sort of
that's just
something like
simple.
that.
Okay, and that's enough to. And if the person says yes or no, if they don't answer, you're
Or I don't
like,
know, yeah.
okay,
Then
okay,
yeah, then
yeah, okay, okay.
and that's part of the responsibility of it too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've hit every single thing on this document. I am so thankful because I this is like 1% probability that any of these things would be a problem, or maybe larger with the credit card. Let's say, or like or paying the bill. Like I had no idea that that even happened. So I think that these are kinds of things that are preventing a whole bunch of other issues later on. If you can just pre-anticipate them and have a conversation beforehand. Is he going to remember this? I don't know, but I can actually just point to this, like, remember, read this document. That would be helpful. Thank you so much. We've been talking to Marjorie Savage about her book, You're on Your Own, but I'm here if you need me, mentoring your child during the college years. Thank you so much. I
Thank
appreciate it.
you. It's been fun.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.